Hello everyone, what's up? In tonight's video I'll show you how I painted and weathered this Star Wars Legion Dwarf Spider Droid. More specifically, I will cover the process in 6 parts. Part 1, Priming. Part 2, Metallics. Part 3, Basecoat and Chipping. Part 4, Airbrushing Enamels. Part 5, Pinwash. And Part 6, Drybrushing. Towards the end I will also share my conclusions about this build and the model itself. This video is divided into chapters, so you can more easily review particular techniques if you like. Let's get started, shall we? Instead of a dedicated primer, I wanted to try something new. Tamiya LP1 Black, which I've had for a while but never used. This is what we call a true lacquer paint, and as such, it has a lot of bite and can create a very tough finish even though it's not a primer. As usual with other Tamiya paints, I thinned it around 50% with lacquer thinner and sprayed it around 20 psi. As you can see, coverage was really excellent, and it was very easy for me to do thin coats and at the same time achieve a smooth finish. Because this paint is a glossy black, I thought it could be a great undercoat for the metallics. Let's see if that was the case. Speaking of metallics, I chose Xtreme Metal Gunmetal, which you will have seen me use multiple times before. Same old, right? Well, no. As soon as I started spraying it, I could tell that the effect I was getting was vastly superior to the grainy opaque finish that I got on the AAT tank, for example. It was a bit like black magic, pardon the pun. I was getting a super smooth, highly reflective finish without any effort, and in fact using a lot less paint. To be honest, I've only ever cared about primers in terms of their toughness, but this experience taught me that in future I should also consider the difference that they could make to the actual paint finish, at least when it comes to metallics. Anyway, the end result was beautiful, and I was ready to start with the upper carapace. Before the base coat, I applied some camo putty in order to minimize overspray later. Then I sprayed a generous coat of chipping fluid in a couple of passes, and I let it dry for around 20 minutes. My paint of choice for the base coat was Tamiya LP5, which is a semi-gloss black as opposed to the glossy one I use as the undercoat. This time I went with the AK Interactive thinner, not because I like it, to be honest I much prefer the Tamiya one, but because its composition makes it compatible with chipping fluid. Spraying this black was easy enough, but I should really have lowered the pressure a bit, given how close I have to get to the model for this. Anyways, the real problem would come in a few moments. Wait for it. There. Yes, I actually broke the gun in half. So, after letting the paint dry for about 30 minutes, I added some water and I got ready for my new chipping method, which we could call needle chipping. That's right, I use an old airbrush needle instead of a brush, and I chip the paint along the panel lines. After putting the model back together as best I could, I decided to apply ammo engine grime with the airbrush. Rather than acting as a traditional wash, this will tint the metallics, effectively working like a filter. The idea is to make the model more interesting, particularly as my concept for this army is that it's defending a rusty, abandoned separatist base, much like the one in one of my favorite Star Wars Rebels episodes, entitled The Last Battle. As you can see, I'm spraying the enamel quite liberally, more so than you usually watch me do. However, the real reason for that is that, well, even with my 0.5mm setup and at 25 psi, which is quite high, the enamel wash is pretty hard to spray. Essentially, either you hose it down, or it won't spray at all. In any case, the effect wasn't too exaggerated, so I was happy enough. After letting the model dry for 24 hours, I removed some of the excess with a cotton bud and some enamel thinner. The idea is to go over edges and surface details, leaving the wash in the recessed areas. However, as you will see, another thing that I'm definitely leaving behind is a lot of cotton strands on the model in the process. This is why I almost never use cotton buds anymore. I should have used my dedicated blending sponges by Make for this very reason. Lesson learned! This Ammo track wash is one of my favorite products. In order to increase contrast and make small details like rivets stand out more, I still wanted to apply a traditional pin wash. As usual, I thinned the wash down a little bit, and I applied it with a synthetic liner brush, which gives you really fine control. My apologies for the camera shake, by the way. This is the price to pay for having a big satellite dish in a region with huge gale winds. Yes, I know, I should remove the bloody thing, shouldn't I? Anyways, as you can see, the pin wash worked fairly well, despite the surface not being really glossy anymore. Adding this step took more time, of course, but I was quite happy with the combined effect of the two different enamels. The last touch was to apply some light dry brushing to the legs, using the excellent dedicated Drybrush paints by Ammo and this natural hair dry brush by Army Painter, which I had never tried before. Now, dry brushing is, well, dry brushing, right? After all, my 7-year-old has a pretty good grasp of this already, so is there anything worth explaining? Well, one thing I would like to tell you is that there is a clear difference between using this awesome gel-like paint and this super soft brush and using just regular acrylics and some old flat brush. So to those shouting to the four winds that the Ammo dry brush paints are just like the biggest con of the century, maybe you should actually try new products before passing judgment on them? Sometimes having the best tool, the best instrument for the job is not just about the end result, but about enjoying the process. For me, this step was a real pleasure, but that wasn't only because of the paint and the brush, of course, but because I hadn't done any dry brushing literally in months. And it's always nice to change things up, isn't it? Now you might be wondering about the lenses. This I did off screen. In any case, it was just a matter of Tamiya clear red over metallics, nothing fancy. As for the base, I followed the exact same steps as I had for my Super Battle Droids, so if you want to know more about the basing, you know where to look. My first conclusion with this project is never to run out of brass rod again. When you're a klutz like me, you never know when you're gonna need it for some pinning. Yes, I'm talking about the gun that I broke. On a more serious note, this model really was great fun. Again, I put it together with my son, who really liked its cartoony looks, and for me this is always a plus. If you're a Clone Wars fan, like we are, then I highly recommend this kit, whether or not you intend to play the Star Wars Legion game. The model is very easy to build, but at the same time it's highly detailed, and I find its price quite reasonable. And no, this is not a paid promotion, just my personal opinion. So overall, this was a fun project, except for when I broke the weapon in half, of course. As always, I would like to thank all my Patreons. Your support means a lot to me personally, and it helps me keep the lights on. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and stay tuned for more hobby content. Thank you all, and remember, keep it up and weather it out.